Today we have an incredible panel here with us. I am so honored to be on stage and sharing the seats with these women. To my right, I have Lydia Lin, who is responsible for the beautiful tea that you're trying this morning. She is the co-founder of Steep in Chinatown. If you haven't been, you gotta go. Next up, we've got Chef Mei Lin. I'm sure a lot of you recognize her. She is the chef behind Daybird. You did have the restaurant Nightshade. It's okay, Katsu, we're not gonna eat you. And finally, is Asuka Hisa. She is representing the ICA, the Institute of Contemporary Arts. She is the Director of Learning and Engagement. And today we just have a panel of women who are all creatives and experts in their industry, and I think this is gonna be a lot of fun to talk about it. But I'd like to kind of jumpstart straight into Lydia. If we could talk a little bit about Steep, because I am an avid coffee drinker, but I know that tea is really having kind of a revolutionary space right now back home. How do you want that to kind of influence culture here in the States or in LA?
So the whole thing probably gonna go back to 2019. That's when started. It's around the same time like May. That's when my partner Sam at Steep and hi. There you are. Okay. Okay, so that was the time we went to Asia. He went to Taiwan, I went to China. So we see this a new wave of tea room, like modern tea room that's like popping up everywhere, even in Japan that's the same thing. So we just thought, why can we have this in America for the younger Asian American or even non-Asian American who will understand Chinese tea a little bit more and to enjoy it in a way that they can appreciate tea culture. Because we often think about Chinese tea here is about like boba tea or a really intimidating like a tea master just making the tea for the staff for the customers. So we want to do something that's more engaging with the customer that we have, so we can actually set up the tea set like this at Steep, and we can give you a little demonstration, so you can actually do the tea to get to understand every process, every tool, so that way you know the great things about this culture.
What do you think it is about tea that really attracted you to the practice of it? And how do you think that resonates with the younger generation? Because tea, when I think of it, stereotypically, it's of an older generation. Like my mom loves tea. Yeah. So for you, what is it that really kind of wanted to get you engaged in this cultural context?
I think when I was young, I don't really see it, or I don't really appreciate it as much, because it's just something that we always have at home. When I get older, that I actually get into it, I feel like tea is really similar to just life in general. And you have the essential principles, and it's just the same thing like you making tea, you have the essential principles, the time, the tea leaf, the temperature, and then everybody have their own way to making tea. And there's no right or wrong way to do things or to make tea. It's just really similar in life. So that really impacted me. But I don't realize that until I'm an older or more mature age. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's how tea impacted me in a really philosophy way.
Well, before we jumped up here, I felt like I was kind of on a date with you, because you were telling me about your background, and she is one fierce lady. She has a background in marketing. You studied business. Obviously, you're a co-founder of your own business called Steep, but you also have a 9-to-5 doing legal work as well. So in the practice of tea, like you're saying, it takes the patience, it takes kind of the focus and the concentration. Do you feel like because Los Angeles is that kind of city with this crazy rhythm, it allows you to kind of slow down, step back?
Another thing that we kind of celebrate or promote at Steep is slow living, because we all have a really busy lifestyle, a career-driven, and because of the pandemic, a lot of people realize that they should slow down, they should focus more on themselves, and they could have actually a lifestyle that they could appreciate. So I think that's where when people come to steep, they feel like this is kind of like a little oasis that they can actually work, but they can also have a conversation with friend, or they can just actually bring the date to steep and just actually have a conversation without checking on their phone.
So a lot of what you do is a bit of education as well.
We call it sharing instead of educating. Yeah, because we don't.
That's how you get your students in the door. Yeah.
Because we don't see ourselves being like a tea master. I would never call myself that because I only have a passion in tea, and I never work in the tea industry, or my family don't own a tea land or tea farm. So I think we're just sharing what we like, and we always tell customer, you should experiment it yourself and see, what is the best for you. Like I may like tea a little stronger, and then Mei could like her tea a little lighter, so everyone's a little different. So you just have to be there and try it yourself.
Thank you. Chef Mei, I would love to hear a little bit more about, I don't even know, do you ever incorporate tea into your menu creation or when you're thinking about dishes? Is that something that kind of hits on nostalgia for you?
100%. I think that tea is one of those things that I truly enjoy drinking. I prefer it over coffee. I think it has a different type of caffeine. For me, that's how I like to start my mornings off, whether it's black or whether it's green. It's a very soothing type of ritual for me, and it's I don't know. It's just it's a way to kind of slow down your day, like you were talking about, and yeah, I love incorporating it to pair with food. Because I think tea is one of those ingredients that hasn't really been touched on enough. Tea is so special, and the way that you harvest tea and the way that you age tea is just not talked about enough, and it's not thoroughly explored, in my opinion. So
process is a big part of culinary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only process, but I think personal journey, cultural context, as we've spoken about. When you approach your menu creation, how much are you leaning into the idealism, the ideas that come from your personal experience, and then also you got to be pragmatic because you're running a restaurant day to day and you've got to make money.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about that creative process.
Well, for me, it's really about creating some sort of nostalgia, and that's typically how I like to create a dish or a menu. It's really touching at the heartstrings that what is going to resonate with, not just with me, but with the diner. It's all about craveability whenever I create a dish. Is the guest going to want to come back and have this dish again and again and again? That's sort of my process in creating something. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of putting it, because when I create as well, I like the idea of someone saying, "Oh my God, that reminds me of when I was a kid," and it may be in an entirely different context because my childhood is very different from your childhood, but yet that flavor hits some sort of familiar note in both of us, despite the differences. And I do think that as artists, we talk about culinary, but it's the culinary arts, right? We are artists when it comes to thinking about plate up, you eat with your eyes first, texture, flavor, but kind of moving down the line. Asuka, a lot of what you do has to do with education, but you're working with artists all the time. I would love to hear a little bit about what's going on at ICA, because currently you have an exhibit that kind of speaks directly to what this panel is about.
Okay, yes, thank you. And I love just listening to both of you talk, all of you talk about tea. The spirit of welcome and graciousness and hosting and care are a big part of what our institution does, where I'm part of this nonprofit. It's an art museum, an art space in downtown Los Angeles. It's not one of the big museums. It's actually an intimate space. And currently we do have an exhibition that is happening during AAPI month. It's called Scratching at the Moon. It features 13 Asian American, diasporic Asian American artists who have deep ties to Los Angeles, It's intergenerational, and it's very, very interesting. And I handle all the programs. I do lots of programs around the exhibitions, but also in cultivating a greater appreciation for art in one's life, in society. And that also involves looking at all dimensions of the creative sector, the cultural sector, which would obviously include food. And I was talking in preparation for this with Casey about one of the programs we just recently did, which was called The Potluck of Ideas. And it was with the AAPI Arts Network, which is a group of incredible thinkers who work in the creative sector. They are curators, they are writers, they are designers, they're artists, of course. And we think about what it is to be AAPI today. What is it to be in Los Angeles, but the world? And so this group meets regularly, and there's always a potluck. And so have to have the potluck. And so for this public program, it was a chance to meet this network that meets regularly and discusses ideas. But we thought, make it a potluck of ideas in addition to the actual potluck. So bellies were full and minds were nourished in that time. Just to give you an example of one of the types of programs we would do.
One of many incredible types of programs that you do. I could have spoken to you for probably more time than you could have given me.
Same.
that day. But you asked the question of what is it to be AAPI today? And it's a very big question. I wonder if maybe you could give us an example of an answer to that kind of question, and maybe we can go down the line.
While we have a cultural specific exhibition, these artists are working in diverse ways with diverse communities and integrated, and also we have the choice to be either widely integrated in all types of cultures and societies, as well as within our own. So I think that's the beauty in working toward being AAPI, is being able to be everywhere, but also affirming traditions, affirming one's identities, and while also transmitting, as you said, sharing. I'm not like educating, just like pounding people over the head. No, just actually transmitting and sharing. That's a very important part of being AAPI, to create a big understanding of what our cultural mixes are in this world.
How important is it, Lydia? Hi. How important is it to your identity that you opened Steep? When you first opened Steep, I'm sure that you had a very clear vision. It just underwent renovation. I would love to hear more about why you decided to kind of evolve the concept and the space.
So when we first started the space, it's more just focusing on tea. And then simply we thought just, doing tea ceremony, just a simple tea concept. And then as the pandemic goes, we understand that the lifestyle has been changed. And a lot of people, they have a lot of options. They don't want to just do one thing. It's the same thing for running a business, that we don't want to just focus on one thing. So we can expand our business. We get the liquor license, and we're doing tea cocktails at night right now. So we, but also it's all tea-centric, so tea-centric. So in the morning, we just focus on doing tea ceremony.
No tea cocktails in the morning.
Sorry, not yet.
Just an idea.
Thank you, though. Well, yes. That might work, like a Sunday brunch idea. And then at night, as a social aspect, so alcohol becomes like a really big topics in the modern culture. But there's a movement going for a lower ABV cocktails. So incorporating tea is another way that will infuse the alcohol and also incorporate the Chinese ingredients and also the culture, how we, like the cooking ingredient that we have, but put it into a cocktail. So that's something that we really wanted to demonstrate to our audience and let them know that the possibility of using tea in not just cooking or just consuming directly, but also can make into cocktails.
How do you start that process of creating those cocktails? Because I know how it goes as a chef, but do you start with the spirit? What is the process?
It all started with drinking. Yeah, so it started with drinking.
She can drink. I've been out with her. It's impressive.
But when I was in Asia, so we do a lot of research to see what works for us.
Research, education,
yes. Research. So a lot of times in Japan or Taiwan or China, or Asia, and I'm not sure about Korea, I haven't been there for a long time, they have this concept called morning tea, evening cocktail. So in the same space, they have the two business model in the one space. So I really like that idea. So the space becomes more like a social house. So you social through tea, you social through coffee. So it's the same way that we really wanted to bring that concept here to the States. And I've seen a few establishments like that in New York, but not so much in LA. I think in LA, the business model is still pretty straightforward. Like you go to a coffee shop to get coffee, you go to a donut shop to get donuts. But so sometimes people get a little confused. Like, so Steve, what are you? Are you a tea room? Are you a bar? What do you guys identify yourself? So we really want to just tell people that we just a really tea-centered space that you can socialize with your friends and families at the space, whether it's through food, tea, or tea cocktails. So that's the kind of like a transformation that we're doing currently than just the beginning of the time, yeah.
And it is very much a personal expression, right?
It is really a personal thing that myself and Sam, my partner, that we both believe in. Yeah.
Right. And where are you from?
I'm from Guangzhou, China. So I lived there, I born there, and I moved here when I was in middle school.
In middle school.
So I kind of have the 1.5 Asian, like immigrant Asian American background.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think identity is something that, especially since we are tackling AAPI, for me, being half Japanese, but being born in Los Angeles, my identity had always been very confusing. So I always say, who I am is of place, of Los Angeles. And I kind of wanted to talk to Mei about what it is about Los Angeles that made you want to open a restaurant here, build your name, express yourself.
Well, that question is really funny because I didn't really know that I really wanted to open up a restaurant. That was really never a goal of mine, I guess. And I think, coming off of doing a show like Top Chef, there's a lot of pressure like, hey, when are you opening up a restaurant? When are you doing this? And like, a lot of people come out and want to invest and things like that. But I really took the time to really figure out what I wanted to do. I took that time and I traveled, and if I had opened up a restaurant right after the show, it wouldn't have been as successful. I myself didn't know what my identity was. I think it takes a lot of maturity to really know what you want to do, and it takes time. But going back to your question is the identity of like the concept that I wanted to do was really just like a culmination of my upbringing, my adventures, and my travels, and all of those things put together.
Where are you from?
I am born in Toisan, China, but I was raised in Dearborn, Michigan. So Dearborn, Michigan, if you know, is the home of Henry Ford, where Ford Motor Company is based out of, and home of a lot of Middle Eastern people. So that's a lot of the food that I grew up eating as well as Chinese food. So I have a lot of different backgrounds and like my upbringing. So it's really fun.
And we'll see that reflected in your food.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that you obviously you are an artist yourself. You work with artists all the time. How important is it for the artist perspective to have a sense and confidence in identity when they begin to showcase through whatever medium they are showcasing their art?
It's a process, as we all just described. Getting your identity is shaping every day, with your experiences. When I provide programs, I want it to be a new exposure, so it actually creates more dimension to your identity as a person who is living in Los Angeles at the time, or and we want not only it coming from us and whatever we present, but also what you bring to our community. So I feel like it is a process. Now, of course, everybody has their experiences and their upbringings and what they bring to it, and that's another thing about being around the AAPI community lately. Very deeply, and seeing and hearing about everyone's different upbringings. You know, you might have somebody who grew up in the suburbs. You might have somebody who grew up in the in urban centers, or immigrated here, or are naturally Angelino. You know, I grew up in Los Angeles, so I was born and raised in Los Angeles. So we all have these different perspectives, and where do we meet? So all of those identities are incredibly interesting and fascinating, and that's kind of where I get very excited, because it's like, wow, there's just so much richness. And I also mentor teens, and I want the teens to know that they have a voice. It's not like they're too young and they don't know who they are yet. They do, they know, they see, they have a perspective. So it's all about bringing perspective. Now how that manifests in an artwork. Again, I know artists. I have artist children, and so, I mean, they're adults, but they are also forging their identity, and it's a evolutionary process. I know just from myself, from being an artist, like what I made when I was 18 is not what I'm going to be making today. So we all know this. We change, we grow, we evolve.
It's similar to when you may read your favorite book, you know, for the first time, and then you revisit it maybe 10, 15 years later after you yourself have gone through so much experience and have evolved, and the book takes on an entirely different meaning.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't like spinach when we were babies, and then suddenly we love it. We love mushrooms. We didn't like them when we were babies, you know, so.
Yeah, who knew we would be so adverse to the color green? Yeah. And now it's like garnish green, you know?
Yeah, right.
Get as much
Our
green on the
tastes
plate.
Evolve.
Absolutely. You said something really beautiful to me the last time we spoke. You said part of what draws you to your work is critique of the familiar and empathy of the different.
Oh, that's right out of our mission statement.
Well, I'm saying you said it.
I will not take credit. I was in the room in the formulation of this mission statement, and it's a longer mission statement that our museum sparks the pleasure of discovery, and then we do that through our programs and exhibitions. But then we also want, as a guiding principle, look at critique of the familiar and have empathy for the different. So that is, again, what I was talking about earlier about celebrating differences and creating bridges to understanding the different, and critiquing what we're always just fall back and be comfortable with, like don't get too comfortable. There's so much to discover out there. Empathy with the different is so important right now. And so I've been looking and rereading our mission statement quite a bit lately, and very proud of it. And it is our guiding principle.
Mei, you mentioned, you know, the importance of nostalgia and how you love when people can take a bite and have that moment kind of resonate with them personally, even if it's from a whole different narrative. I think that food is so effective because it can bring people together. Just as you said, critique of the familiar. When you approach your dishes, do you think about a dish or an ingredient that might be, I'm just gonna give you a terrible example, like American meatloaf, right? So an American will see meatloaf and they're like, oh, I love meatloaf. And then
I love meatloaf.
And then you are somehow able to transition it to be your identity it opens doors. You know, the idea of connectiveness through art, because the understanding of it, the way in which we interpret it is always going to be personal. But how do we approach our art, and this applies to you too, Lydia, how do we approach our art so that people remain curious? They want to know more about something that is rather unfamiliar, but at least they can begin to understand it.
That question is funny because I think that a lot of different cultures are very intertwined through colonization and things of that nature. But yeah, speaking to meatloaf, it's not a bad example, by the way, but we have a Chinese version of meatloaf called juyokbang, and that's, I mean, to introduce that into, I guess, like the American palate, it's no different than regular meatloaf. It might just be seasoned with different spices and roots and things like that. So a lot of different aromatics. It's all very familiar, and it may look a little bit different, but comfort level, I think, is on the same level. And it's gonna be very comforty. It's very homey. And it's really all about how you put it together.
Do you have an example of something similar? I know that you said that you opened the door with drinking, but in terms of your cocktails, I would love to hear, you know, how you approach which teas you're going to use, how they pair with whatever spirit you're choosing.
Well, you involve a lot of experimenting for sure. So it took us, for the first menu, it took us about 6 months to get to the first menu because we were doing a lot of experimenting to make sure that how long to steep the tea in the alcohol versus how much tea steep in the alcohol, and then what kind of tea we'll be using in the different types of alcohol will be all different. So it involves a lot of nights of testing, a lot of mix and match and see what we can come up to, something that we still wanted to taste the tea. Well, using tea in alcohol is not like a new thing in any culture. Like in America, it's the same way. If you go to a lot of restaurants or bar, you've seen some kind of tea elements in alcohol or in cocktails. But what we're trying to create is tea forward, not just as a supplemental to the cocktail. So you always would taste the tea first, and then you would taste all the other elements that you go into the cocktails.
Not an afterthought. Yeah, which I think is really important to the way that you are expressing yourself, right? If you're going to do this as a part-time gig, surely...
It's more like a full-time now.
Yeah, now it's full-time.
Yeah.
So to kind of round out, guys, I wanted to know if you as an owner, co-founder, you as a chef within the culinary space, obviously you within the art space, and years of experience of coming up within the art space, are there challenges to being Asian American? Have you had any experiences that you felt challenged you for better or for worse? Silence is good.
I guess I don't think that I've had any necessarily hard challenges as an Asian American in the industry that I'm in. I think that it was always valued because, I mean, I hate to be stereotypical, but I think that it was always like, okay, we're like the hardest workers and things of that nature. So
One stereotype is really true.
I mean, it is true. We are, and so I think that kind of just used it to our advantage, you know, really.
Me? Well, I've always had a challenge being born in Los Angeles with my first name being spelled Asuka, and you pronounce it as if there were no U. So it spells out as Asuka, and everyone calls me Asuka first, but it's pronounced Asuka. So I've had to affirm my name every time. It's the story of my life. And, you know, why my parents put me through that is still a mystery. They stand by their decision, but it's like just from day one. and I've had to, and so that is a really thing that I'm very sensitive about, you know, pronunciation, identity, now we have fluidity, and I want to be able to respect all of people's choices and affirm identity. But in the field when I started was not as diverse as it is today. It's still not fully diverse. You'll still see non-diverse spaces and non-diverse situations, and you just have to be the unusual suspect in the room, and be the unusual and unique, and be able to affirm that position, own it, and then eventually those situations will change.
My name is Casey Felton, which if you Google it is any male under the sun who is definitely not part Asian. So identity for me as well, when I look at my parents and I wonder why did they name me Casey Felton, it doesn't help. And it has been an issue of identity for me as well. And thankfully, I grew up with my mom cooking such incredible food inspired by what is here in Los Angeles. So Lebanese, Chinese, Mexican, that palette is kind of what led me into my art and my medium. But asserting myself as not only a female, because Casey is a male name on top of that, I feel you within that space. It has been an uphill climb in understanding identity, because I think sometimes with name, thankfully Katsu's got a perfect name. It's the first thing that you identify yourself as, because it is the first label that you know. And I think labels here in America can be tough. We in this country like to label everything, and I don't necessarily think that that's a healthy thing. For Steep, why did you choose Chinatown? Was that important to you to have a familiar neighborhood?
Actually, China is not familiar to me before we start Steep, because I grew up in the SUV, which is a little bit adjacent to Chinatown. But since my partner and me, we both immigrants, we wanted to show appreciation to the old Chinatown culture, and also to the people who come here earlier, like the past generation that actually came here to start this community. And we wanted to go back to Chinatown to give back to the community as well. So we've been doing a lot of events that will bring the Chinatown merchants together, and also to bring like Asian American vendors and merchants together to do events in Chinatown. So that way we want more people to come in Chinatown to, to thrive again in that community.
What are some of those events? Because I've been to a couple of them, and I think it's worth mentioning for the audience to know.
So we do markets. So we do 2 markets a night. Not a night, that would be a lot.
She is an overachiever, but
2 markets a year. So we do like summer night markets in summertime. So that way we bring a lot of people to Chinatown, and we have like foods, we have music, and we also have like vendors that sell, like small merchants, like Asian American merchants that they sell their like craft and stuff. And we also have a holiday market that's in December. And we encourage all Asian Americans to participate. If you guys know anybody, let us know. And also Chinatown merchants as well. Like we don't do it as like a really big thing, but we do want to get the words out there to have people to come to Chinatown to just check out the space, to check out not just Steep, but to check out the 2 street or the couple blocks in Chinatown, like what are we offering right now, how it's been changed, how it's been developed. So we want people to come back to that area.
it's exciting. I can't wait to visit your new space. I think the renovation is going to be amazing to witness.
Thanks.
Also, do you do the food?
I do most of the food, but because Sam's Taiwanese, so I also wanted to shine on some of his, home recipe as well. So we kind of partner up and get like a hybrid menu, and we also incorporate tea in a lot of the cooking as well. So we let people know like how you can utilize tea as an ingredient or seasoning, or just maybe just soften the meat, and how we can utilize tea in cooking.
Perfect. Yeah. Chef Mei, are you going to be opening anything coming up? We miss, Nightshade. I miss Nightshade. I love Daybird. obviously, but you mentioned you didn't necessarily purposely fall into restaurants. There are other ways now. You've maneuvered into other ways of being a voice to your craft. Do you want to open another restaurant?
I do. There might be something in the works, but you know, I think that in the climate that we're in right now, like restaurants are really hard. You know, the margins are not the best, and so it's tough. And I think just opening up a business in California is very stressful. So, yeah, yeah, you know, but yeah.
Okay, so everyone just wait in suspense. That's the answer to that. Thank you guys for coming up on this panel. I did want to open up to the audience and find out if there are any questions, because there are 3 incredible ladies up here with a breadth of knowledge that you should definitely pick at. Anyone with questions?
Hi, everyone. I guess this is more for maybe Lydia and Mei Lin, because I actually just flew in last night from Hong Kong. I was there for a couple weeks, and tea. You know, Chinese people use tea so much with meals, and it seems to have a very good digestive assistance, I guess, especially like with dim sum and stuff like that. After you drink the tea, you feel so much better. Could you speak a little bit about that use? Just curious if there's anything behind that.
I think that when I eat, I typically like to drink pu'er. I think that it has a good amount. It's an aged tea. It's a oxidized tea. It has a lot of, I would say it has a lot of healing properties. It has the right amount of tannins to really, I guess, like cleanse your palate when you're eating fatty foods. And that's particularly the reason why I like to drink that tea with the meals that I eat. As to why, I don't know if you can speak to why that is.
Pu'er has been a really commonly consumed tea for Cantonese, so we're both Cantonese, so we know. And it's always the pairing with dim sum, because dim sum's on a greasier side, and pu'er is actually going to help you to kind of like scrape the grease from your system. So that's the way to get you to eat more, actually. Yeah, so that works. And because dim sum, you don't order just one dim sum, you order like 5 or 10 sometimes.
12.
Or 12.
20.
20. So
All you can eat.
pu'er is definitely the way to go. Usually that's what people, Cantonese will consume pu'er, because that's the way you scrape all the grease from your system. And if you just drink tea without eating, it's going to be actually pretty bad for your stomach. Yeah, so you may get a little heartburn, a little acid reflux. Depends on the tea that you consume. And especially with the aged tea, it actually have a stronger effect too as well. So there's pros and cons. Yeah, so if you consume tea with food, it's always the best. And if you keep drinking tea, like when we have the tea ceremony in Steve, regardless of what kind of tea, it will increase the metabolism. So we always pair some food for you, like dry foods, pastries, so that way you feel hungry faster, but then you have something to munch on.
I'm always fascinated with the medicinal properties of tea. I mean, there's so many things. It's a medicine.
Well, anything I said today is not FDA approved. just my personal opinion and my readings.
I saw that you brought the beautiful bottles of white tea, cold brew white tea, and maybe just what is it about? What is it, white tea?
So white tea maybe not as commonly known in America, but it's actually believed to be the most ancient tea that that's been discovered in China. So that's how we started is white tea. So white tea is always just sun dry. You just lean it out there and just let it dry. So never been processed, never been roasted, never been oxidized. So you just consume it the way it is. So it's always really light. It looks like just dry leaf fall off from the tree, but you actually have a lot of gray like amino acids. It's actually good for women as well. And it's believed to be a medicine after 5 years. So it could be aged, or you can consume as a young tea, like what we have here, we actually have the 1-year white tea, which is, we wanted to taste the freshness of the tea, freshly cut. And what you guys have in the bottle, that is a 5-year tea, so it's a little bit more smooth. It's actually, if you taste the differences, this is more refreshing and that's more smooth. So tea, just every year, the aging process is different, so the flavor will change as well. So just like wine.
Can we discuss kind of the ritual, the process of tea up here that you've got going on?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I bought the essential tools that we have at Steep. So we have like tea tube that will help us throughout the whole process. And we usually have a pot. I didn't bring the pot today. I bought a gaiwan. So it's a different vessel that you can actually steep tea in. And we always have a fairness cup, and it's called like a serving cup. So you steep the tea in the gaiwan or a pot, and you string in it and you pour it to a fairness cup or a serving cup, and then you serve to the teacups. So those are like the essential items that goes into a tea ceremony.
Is there temperature control of how hot you want your water, how long you steep your tea?
Yeah, we usually will give a customer like a little guidance on the tea. That the essential 3 principles for tea will be the type of tea, time, and temperature. So that's why we always wanted to use a certain temperature for certain tea, depends on the type of tea. Yeah, so for example, like black tea or pu'er tea or even white tea, you wanted to use a higher temperature to draw out the flavor and draw out the nutrients from the tea. And then green tea is never in process, it's a broad tea, so you want to use a lighter temperature so that way you just don't burn it or it's going to make it too strong or too bitter.
Beautiful. Anybody?
Hi, everybody. My question is for Mei Lin. You touch upon the idea of finding yourself and also be mature enough to open a restaurant, because creating the menu is kind of like 10% of opening a restaurant. I feel like there's so many other aspects like operations and things like that. So could you tell us, like in your journey of like finding that right time to open, like what other skill sets did you need it to cultivate within yourself? And then the second part of the question, sorry, it's kind of long, is after, closing down Nightshade and trying to figure out this new landscape for culinary artists like yourself, like if opening a restaurant isn't profitable and therefore it's not very like a good use of time, for example, like how do you still like cultivate again that creativity, and like how would that evolve in your future endeavors?
Okay, well, I think the two of those questions combined, I think it really comes down to community, and it's really who you surround yourself with. So first question, I guess for me, I took the time to talk to peers, just to connect with different chefs, different people from all aspects within the industry, and really to get their takes on what their experiences were opening up a restaurant or opening up a business in general. Because you don't necessarily have to open up a restaurant. You can open up, you can have a CPG line. You can work in the media side of things, whether it's doing food styling or working as a culinary producer on a show. I mean, there's so many different aspects of the food industry that are endless. So you can really go anywhere. And the second question, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
So the second question,
Yeah.
I'm actually asking for myself,
Okay.
because I also opened a restaurant.
Okay.
And I had to close during COVID because it was just very hard to make, again, margins of any sort. And yeah, I think I'm at that crossroad where, you've mentioned like there are so many different ways of doing it. But it's like, now that you understand that, hey, maybe a restaurant's not the best use of time right now.
Yeah.
Like, how would you figure out this next step?
The how is a little bit difficult, and it takes a while to really figure it out. Yeah, it's a really hard question to answer. But yeah, I mean, you could hit me up afterwards. We can have an in-depth conversation about it. Yeah, it is really hard, and you know, closing down a restaurant is very difficult, and it's not just about you. It's the livelihood of every single person that works within that restaurant, back and front, and so it's yeah, it's no easy thing to do. So.
What I would recommend for you to do is to not stop creating. Even if it's not lucrative, even though you might not be sharing it with a dining room, continue, because if you stop, who knows how you're gonna jump back into it. It's just the healthy thing to do for self-expression. Yeah. Anybody else?
Just bouncing off that question, of course, the arts, any form of the arts is difficult. What gives you inspiration in your darkest hour?
Music.
Ooh, wow.
Good music.
Music is a really good one. I think it goes back to, you know, just reaching out to community, just your peers, and having conversations. I think that's it's the best form of therapy in my experience. So
My therapy would definitely be traveling. So you explore different cultures, and then you will see, okay, how I can actually incorporate my life story into that, or how that's going to relate to myself, and to kind of encourage me to move forward. Yeah, so it's definitely traveling for me.
I'd reinforce what Casey said, which is don't stop. As artists, I'd say, you know, even if you drew something simple every day, it's at least getting your brain and your body still in it. I know it can be very hard, it can be very challenging, and depending on what you're up against, but don't stop, because it'll come back. It's cyclical.
Yeah, you might fail a bunch, but eventually it'll come back and you'll hit some home runs.
Yeah, and stay in community, like Mei said.
Yeah, community being very, very important. Anybody else?
I'm curious what your death row cup of tea is.
wow.
We've entered
Curious
darkness,
about what we
y'all.
did to get on death row.
First, what was your crime? Second, what is your death row tea?
That's a really hard one, because I really love tea. Oh my God, that's so twisted. I'll just name top three in no specific order. I would do pu'er, hojicha, and like a milk tea blend. So it's like that's like my go-to.
What about you two? Oh, yeah.
I think for me, would definitely be the tea cocktail first. For sure. You know, that just cures a lot of problems and issues. And I really like white tea. That's why I want to introduce to you guys the white tea today. And it's just been something that I've been recently drinking a lot. And also pu'er. Like pu'er it used to be my first, and then now jump, you know, down to three, the third space. Yeah.
Well, I'm always drinking green tea, so I will drink green tea until I die.
If Yelp were a person, I would murder Yelp. And then my death row tea would be genmaicha, because it reminds me of my mom.
Hi, my name is Clarice with an H, so I can totally relate to your story. Like, why is there an H in Clarice, right? So, well, my question is, being in the arts, you're naturally or commonly forging an unconventional path. And with that, I'm just hoping to understand what the mindset is going through like the early stages of you like forging your path. Is it kind of like testing the waters, or do you just kind of take that leap? And what did that look like for you guys in the beginning of your journey?
You know, I just want to, I'm so curious about everything. So even though I found that art was a path, and I didn't find that until really after college, but I knew that I was just very interested in many things. So that's sort of a thing that actually you'll notice in the programming that's happening at ICLA. It's very diverse and intersecting with people in the art world and not in the art world, because we're trying to create this intersectional experience. So just if you find the one passion, be it art, music, food, design, anything, just keep going with it, but then see where it's connected to other things. Because I'm such a firm believer that art permeates everything we do. It's the most, it makes our lives better. So, and so I'm just on this mission to find it in all forms, whether that's in the usual forms, like in an art museum, an art gallery, but also in non-typical forms, and certainly in food experiences, in everywhere. I mean, art is everywhere. So I think that reinforces a path.
You guys feel good with her carrying that answer? Yeah, okay.
So just going back to the question about closing down, I'm actually on the flip side of that, where I'm in the process of opening up something, a coffee shop for the first time ever. And as a little bit of background of myself, I'm an artist. And so this has been a very steep learning curve, and it has felt like an uphill battle, but we're almost there. But I love hearing the insight of you guys as artists and restaurant owners that have gone through it and seen a lot. If you could go back to your version of yourself at the beginning stages, what would you have loved to hear at that point in time? And it can be any kind of advice, whether it's like mindset or something practical. I would appreciate any and all thoughts and words of advice.
I mean, I guess you're already there, you know, like you're just, you got to jump over that hill. It's very hard in the beginning, and it's going to be very hard for the next few months, but persistence is everything.
And I also think that you should always believe in yourself and believe in your concept. So before I opened Steep, I don't have any culinary background. It's just a tea lover, food lover, but I believe in my concept. I believe that this is the mission that I really believe in. I really wanted to do this, so you should always stick with that. Even down the road, you should still believe in yourself and still believe in your concept.
I think there are just no bad parts if you believe in what you're doing. I often say, oh, I'm in admin hell. But I actually, when I look at my calendar and I see I have 0 meetings that day and I could be in my admin desk day, it's actually, I'm like, fantastic. You know, I can get into it. And just getting into all aspects of your work is important. Like there's no bad, like I don't want to do that. No, it's all part of your vision.
This might be a super Asian thing to say, but if it were easy, you're doing something wrong. It should be hard. So it sounds like you're just right. Guys, that's about all the time we have today. Thank you so much for being here and listening to us, and thank you, ladies, and Aster for hosting us.
Thank you.